Some of Hollywood's most iconic black stars lived every moment under blazing lights, yet carried one truth in the dark until their very last breath. These weren't background names. These were award-winning actors, chart-topping performers, legends whose talent shaped generations. But behind the applause was a quiet war, the fear of judgment, the pressure of fame, and an industry that simply wasn't ready for their truth. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the black actors who kept their sexuality hidden until the day they died, and the heartbreaking reasons they felt they had no choice but to take that secret to the grave. Prepare yourself, because their stories are as heartbreaking as they are unforgettable. Sammy Davis Jr. was more than a star, he was a force of nature. A man who could walk onto any stage in America and own it within seconds. He sang with soul, danced with fire, acted with charm, and made audiences laugh until their sides hurt. As a member of the legendary Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, Sammy shattered barriers no black performer had ever dared touch. But behind that bright smile and those lightning-fast moves was a private world people rarely talk about. A world filled with secrets, pressure, and personal battles that fame couldn't erase. Publicly, Sammy lived the life everyone expected from a Hollywood icon. He married 3 women, including Swedish actress May-Britt. Their marriage in the 1960s sent America into shockwaves at a time when interracial love could get you threatened, blacklisted, or worse. Long before that, his romance with actress Kim Novak nearly blew up the entire studio system, shut down by powerful executives and even the mob, who refused to see a black man with a white woman on that level. But Hollywood whispers told a different story. Some close friends, biographers, and insiders claim that these were not his only relationships. Quiet murmurs suggested Sammy may have also been drawn to men, a truth he never publicly confirmed and one that could have destroyed his entire career if spoken aloud. In an era when being gay meant losing everything, especially for a black man in the spotlight, Sammy may have carried a burden he could never safely name. His search for identity didn't stop there. After surviving a horrific car accident in the 1950s, he converted to Judaism, a decision that shaped the rest of his life. Some say his faith grounded him. Others believe it added another layer to a man already wrestling with who he was behind the curtain. When Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990, the world lost one of the greatest entertainers to ever live. A trailblazer who broke color lines, fought for civil rights, and dazzled audiences for decades. But the rumors, the secrets, and the quiet questions that followed him? Those never died. They remind us that even legends carry shadows, and sometimes the brightest stars hide the deepest truths. Little Richard, the man who didn't just kick open the door to rock and roll, he blew it off the hinges. "Go ahead," he once shouted. "Let it all hang out." And he meant every word. Little Richard wasn't just a performer, he was an explosion wrapped in sequins. With those wild suits, that fire-cracking voice, and the kind of stage moves nobody had ever seen before, he helped invent rock and roll as we know it. Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, Good Golly Miss Molly, these weren't just songs. They were shockwaves that changed American music forever. But behind all that glitter, power, and charisma lived a battle he could never escape. His relationship with his own sexuality. From the time he was young, Richard knew he was different. His father knew it too, and instead of loving him through it, he kicked Richard out of the house as a teenager simply for being gay. Imagine that. A child thrown away for being exactly who he was. That kind of hurt stays with a person for life. Yet Richard refused to disappear. He hit the stage in makeup, rhinestones, and high-heeled confidence, long before the world had language for what he represented. To many, he became one of the first queer icons in music, decades before the word queer was even spoken openly. But inside, the truth wasn't easy. His feelings and his faith pulled him in 2 different directions. One moment, he proudly declared he'd been gay all his life. Another, he denounced it under the weight of religion. In 1982, he said God told him gay was wrong. In 1995, he said the exact opposite, that God was love, not judgment. And by 2012, he called himself omnisexual, famously saying, "Sex is like a smorgasbord. Whatever I feel like, I go for." That was Little Richard, bold, honest, complicated, forever searching for a place where his faith and identity could coexist. His entire life was a tug-of-war between who he was and who he believed God wanted him to be. And that struggle, identity versus religion, is one many LGBTQ+ people still face today. When Little Richard died in 2020 at 87, the world didn't just lose a rock and roll legend. It lost a man who spent his entire life fighting to be seen, heard, and understood. A later documentary, Little Richard, I Am Everything, finally told the story many never knew, the story of a black queer man trying not only to survive the 1950s music industry, but to conquer it. And somehow he did. Little Richard didn't just make music. He made history. And he paid dearly for the right to shine that brightly. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway wasn't just talented, he was a once-in-a-generation soul. His voice carried a kind of beauty that hurt, the kind of emotion that could silence an entire room. A Song for You, This Christmas, and his timeless duets with Roberta Flack made him a legend. But behind that golden voice was a man carrying storms no one could see. Publicly, Donny looked like the picture of a family man. He was married to Eulala Hathaway, and together they had 2 daughters, Layla Hathaway, now an award-winning singer, and Kenya. But some stories that surfaced later tell a different, more complicated truth. According to reports, including a piece from Magnet magazine, Donny may have lived a closeted life, possibly gay or bisexual, but unable to speak openly about it. And when you understand the world he lived in, the silence makes sense. In the 1970s, being openly gay, especially as a black male artist, meant risking everything. Your career, your reputation, and your safety. The music industry was unforgiving, and society was even harsher. If Donny was carrying that secret, it would have been a burden heavy enough to break anyone. But Donny was already battling demons. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a devastating mental illness that brought hallucinations, intense paranoia, and emotional chaos. He feared people were out to harm him. He was hospitalized multiple times. Now imagine living with that and the fear of revealing who you truly are. The pressure must have felt unbearable. Friends and colleagues later said Donny was a man weighed down by secrets, brilliant, loving, soulful, but also overwhelmed and isolated. A stage play, The Donny Hathaway Story, explores his connection with Roberta Flack and subtly touches on the possibility of his queer identity. It doesn't define him by it, but it acknowledges that Donny was more than the public ever knew, more complex, more vulnerable, and far more human. Donny Hathaway gave the world music that healed millions, even while he struggled to heal himself. Luther Vandross. A voice that could melt hearts, but a man who carried one of the heaviest secrets in silence. Behind the bright lights, platinum records, and sold-out shows, there was a part of Luther's life he guarded fiercely, his truth about who he loved. Luther never publicly came out as gay, not once in his lifetime. But those closest to him say the truth was never a mystery, it was simply unspoken. His dear friend, singer Patti LaBelle, revealed in a 2017 interview that Luther was gay, but fear kept him from ever sharing it with the world. Fear of hurting his career. Fear of disappointing fans who adored him. And above all, fear of breaking his mother's heart, the woman he loved more than anything. Patti said Luther worried that coming out would shatter the bond he had with his mostly female fan base. And he couldn't bear the thought of his mother facing judgment or cruelty because of his truth. So he chose silence. Not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted to protect the people he loved. For years, rumors swirled. Fans speculated, pointed to his gentle nature, his elegance, his soft-spoken charm. But Luther never entertained any of it. His message was simple: judge me by my voice, not my private life. And he had every right to draw that line. When Luther passed away in 2005 after a devastating stroke, the conversations he avoided in life grew louder. Friends confirmed what he never said publicly, but they also made it clear: Luther was a deeply private soul who refused to let the media dissect his heart or his relationships. Even in death, fans were split. Some believed discussing his sexuality was disrespectful. Others felt it finally gave LGBTQ+ listeners representation from a man whose music touched millions. But no matter the opinion, the truth remained. Luther lived his life on his own terms. Then, in early 2025, the documentary Luther, Never Too Much arrived. It peeled back the curtain on his life, his rise to fame, his unmatched genius, and yes, the personal battles he kept hidden. The film approached his sexuality with grace, not sensationalism. It didn't try to expose him. It honored him. It allowed the world to understand Luther Vandross not as a headline, but as a human being who loved deeply, hurt quietly, and made music that will outlive us all. Because at the end of the day, Luther's story isn't about secrets. It's about a man who gave the world everything except the pieces of himself he needed to protect. And that choice deserves nothing but respect. Jermaine Stewart. Before the fame, before the hit singles, before the world knew his name, Jermaine was just a young man trying to find his place in music. When he first moved to London, people remembered him as this bright, electric force, full of energy, style, and a voice that instantly made you stop and listen. Coach Club, one of the first to see his potential, brought him into the studio. And from that moment, Jermaine's path to stardom officially began. But behind the lights and the stage presence was a much deeper truth, one that wasn't always safe to live out loud, especially in the 1980s. Jermaine Stewart was a proud gay black man in an industry that didn't know what to do with someone like him. He never shouted it from rooftops, but he never hid it either. He simply lived his truth in the quiet, confident way only Jermaine could. In an era when being openly gay could cost you fans, record deals, or your entire career, Jermaine stood in the middle of it all. Fearless in his style, unapologetic in his fashion, and expressive in every lyric he sang. He didn't fit the macho image labels wanted from black male pop stars. But that's exactly what made him unforgettable. His bold colors, feminine touches, and free-spirited confidence became his signature. And it took real bravery to stand that tall in a world that wasn't ready for him. People in the music scene knew who Jermaine was. Friends, producers, stylists, they saw the real him. But the media never told his story. The industry didn't fully embrace him, and he often avoided talking about his private life in interviews. Yet if you watched closely, everything about Jermaine, his fashion, his movement, his sound, was a love letter to authenticity. But the truth is, the 1980s weren't kind to gay men, especially not to black gay men. AIDS took so many artists, so many voices, and Jermaine was one of them. In 1997, at just 39 years old, Jermaine Stewart died from AIDS-related liver cancer. His passing barely made headlines, and the world quietly moved on. But those who loved him, those who truly knew him, say his spirit never dimmed. Until the very end, he was full of laughter, love, and a joy that couldn't be broken. Jermaine Stewart wasn't just a pop star. He was a trailblazer who dared to live honestly in a time when honesty was dangerous. And that makes his story not just memorable, but heroic. Ethel Waters. Ethel Waters wasn't just a star, she was a force. One of the earliest giants of black entertainment, a woman whose voice shook the walls of the Harlem Renaissance and whose acting broke barriers Hollywood never intended to open for a black woman in the early 1900s. But behind the fame, behind the elegance, behind the history books, there was a truth Ethel carried in silence. Her sexuality. Ethel Waters never publicly said she was gay or bisexual, but the people who knew her best, and many historians today, believe she loved women long before the world was ready to hear it. In the 1920s, she formed a deeply intimate bond with a dancer named Ethel Williams. They lived together, traveled together, and were so close that friends called them the two Ethels. And trust me, in the 1920s, that kind of nickname didn't come by accident. This was decades before it was safe, emotionally, socially, or professionally, to be openly queer, especially for a black woman standing in the spotlight. Ethel married men 3 times, which is why some believe she may have been bisexual. But none of those marriages lasted, and the quiet, powerful connection she shared with Williams was unlike anything else in her life. Ethel guarded her personal life fiercely. Not because she was ashamed, but because the cost of honesty back then was brutal. One whisper could end your career. One rumor could destroy your safety. Being a black woman in show business was already dangerous. Being queer on top of that? It could have ended everything she fought for. Later in life, she turned toward religion. In the 1950s and 60s, she toured with evangelist Billy Graham, singing gospel and sharing testimony. After that, she never spoke of her relationships with women again. Some believe the church pressured her. Others say she tried to bury that part of herself, hoping faith could erase the fear she'd carried for decades. And yet, the LGBTQ+ community never forgot her. One of her greatest admirers was the celebrated photographer Carl Van Vechten, a gay man who captured her strength and vulnerability in portraits that still turn heads today. He photographed her the way she deserved to be seen, bold, brilliant, and unapologetically human. Ethel lived her truth quietly. But the next legend? He hid his truth right up until his final breath. And his story will hit you even harder. Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey wasn't just a dancer, he was a force of nature, a man whose choreography changed American culture forever. When he founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, he didn't just create a company. He created a worldwide symbol of Black brilliance, movement, and soul. His performances were explosive with emotion, joy, pain, triumph, and spirit poured into every step. But behind all that power on stage was a man carrying a truth he almost never spoke aloud. Alvin Ailey was gay. And in his era, that truth could cost you everything. For a Black man in mid-20th century America, being openly gay meant risking your career, your safety, and even your life. So Ailey kept that part of himself locked away from the public. He never came out, never announced it, never let the world see the battles he fought privately. But those close to him knew. And later biographies confirmed what he never dared to say out loud. Instead of words, he used dance. If you look closely at some of his greatest pieces, you'll see the stories he couldn't publicly claim. Tender moments between men, themes of forbidden love, deep loneliness, spiritual longing, and the struggle of living a truth the world told him to hide. He wove masculinity, religion, and same-sex connection into movements so subtle yet so powerful that dancers could feel what he couldn't risk speaking. But Ailey wasn't only fighting societal judgment, he was fighting himself. He lived with bipolar disorder at a time when mental health wasn't understood and certainly wasn't discussed in Black communities. He battled pressure from every direction, being a Black man in a white-dominated dance world, being gay in a violently homophobic society, and dealing with a mind that often worked against him. His silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. In 1989, Alvin Ailey died from AIDS-related complications. Even in his final days, the stigma was so harsh that he asked his doctor to list a different cause of death. He wanted to protect his legacy, his family, and the dance world he gave his life to. It's heartbreaking and telling that a man who brought so much truth to the stage felt he could never fully live his own. Yet his art lives on, carrying his voice, his pain, and his brilliance far louder than words ever could. Paul Winfield. Paul Winfield wasn't just a talented actor, he was a trailblazer. In 1972, he became the first Black man ever nominated for an Oscar for a leading role thanks to his unforgettable performance in Sounder. He shined on television, dominated the stage, and earned the kind of respect only true craftsmen receive. But behind all the awards and applause, Paul carried a truth he never felt safe enough to share publicly. He was a gay Black man in an industry that punished people for simply being themselves. Paul never made grand speeches about his personal life. He didn't have to. The people closest to him, friends, colleagues, castmates, knew the truth. And for nearly 30 years he shared his life with Charles Gillen Jr., an architect who became his partner, his anchor, and his quiet source of joy. 3 decades together, hidden from Hollywood's harsh spotlight, because back then, coming out could end careers instantly. Roles could disappear. Fans could turn their backs. And for a Black actor, the price was even higher. But despite the secrecy, their love was real. Unshakable. When Charles passed away in 2002, Paul was devastated. 2 years later, Paul followed, passing from a heart attack. Today, they rest side by side at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, a final, permanent testament to a love the world never truly got to see. There's another powerful chapter in Paul's story. During the early 1970s, while filming Sounder, Paul lived with his co-star Cicely Tyson for over a year. People assumed they were a couple. Hollywood loves its rumors, but the real story was far more tender. Paul told Cicely he was gay, and instead of gossiping or pulling away, she opened her home to him. She gave him protection from the whispers, the judgment, and the dangers of being outed at a time when it could destroy someone's life. That gesture showed just how deep their friendship ran, and how much weight Paul carried in silence. After he passed, more people began speaking openly about his truth and his long relationship with Charles. Fans were shocked, but also proud that he lived with dignity, loved deeply, and stayed true to himself even when the world wouldn't allow him to say it out loud. Paul Winfield's legacy isn't just about breaking barriers on screen. It's about the courage it takes to live authentically, even in the shadows, and the love that endured despite the world's silence. Richard Bruce Nugent. Richard Bruce Nugent wasn't just an artist, he was a firebrand, a rebel spirit in the heart of the Harlem Renaissance. A writer, painter, poet, and actor, he didn't simply create art, he lived it. And he lived it boldly, openly, and fearlessly as a gay black man in an era when silence was expected and honesty could cost you everything. At a time when most people in his world hid their truth behind closed doors, Richard refused to dim his light. He walked through the 1920s and 1930s with a confidence that shocked some and inspired others. Born in 1906, he rose alongside giants like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, yet he stood apart, not because of his talent, but because of his bravery. He dressed with flair, carried himself like a bohemian prince, and never cared about fitting into anyone's definition of acceptable. His most groundbreaking work, Smoke, Lilies, and Jade, published in 1926, became a cultural earthquake. It was one of the very first works by a black author to speak openly about same-sex love. The story followed a young man falling into a tender, poetic relationship with another man named Beauty. Its dreamy, flowing style made desire feel sacred, soft, delicate, but undeniably real. And in a time when such honesty was considered dangerous, the story shook the arts world to its core. Years later, in a 1983 interview, Nugent explained what he tried to capture in that piece. I intended it to be a soul-searching poem about another kind of lonesomeness. Not the lonesomeness of being racially stigmatized, but otherwise stigmatized. You see, I am a homosexual. That line says everything. Nugent wasn't just battling racism, he was confronting the pain of being judged for loving differently, for existing outside the rules society forced on him. He carried two burdens, yet somehow still found the strength to stand tall. But that honesty came at a cost. Publishers avoided him. Opportunities passed him by. While others from his circle rose to fame, Nugent was often ignored or pushed aside simply because he refused to lie about who he was. Still, he never stopped creating. He kept writing, kept painting, kept pushing boundaries. Richard Bruce Nugent lived his truth long before the world was ready for it. And because of that, he left behind a legacy of courage that still echoes today. Bayard Rustin. Born in 1912, Rustin grew up with an unshakable belief that every human being deserved dignity, fairness, and freedom. Long before his name was ever whispered in history books, he was on the front lines, fighting for civil rights, peace, workers, the poor, and above all, nonviolence. He wasn't just part of the movement, he built it. Rustin was the mastermind behind some of the most important protests in American history, including the legendary 1963 March on Washington, the very moment Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. That historic day? The flawless logistics, the massive crowds, the peaceful discipline? That was Rustin's genius at work. But while he helped guide the movement didn't always protect him. Because Rustin was openly gay in a time when being gay was criminalized, demonized, and used as a weapon, many civil rights leaders feared the backlash. They pushed him into the shadows, denied him credit, and even tried to force him out of the movement he helped build. He was arrested, insulted, and humiliated, not for his activism, but simply for being who he was. And still, he refused to stop fighting. Rustin believed justice wasn't real unless it included everybody: Black Americans, workers, the poor, and the LGBTQ community. In his final years, he became one of the earliest national voices for gay rights, giving speeches and writing powerful essays declaring that freedom meant nothing if it wasn't shared by all. He also found love. His partner, Walter Nagel, was his companion and confidant. But because same-sex marriage didn't exist in the 1980s, Rustin took a bold and unusual step. He legally adopted Walter so they could have the basic protections heterosexual couples took for granted. It may sound strange today, but back then, it was one of the only ways to protect the person you loved. Bayard Rustin passed away in 1987. But history wasn't done with him. In 2013, President Barack Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, finally giving him the honor, recognition, and respect he had been denied for most of his life. It wasn't just a medal, it was a correction, a moment of truth, and a victory for both the civil rights and LGBTQ communities. Rustin once said, "We need, in every community, a group of angelic troublemakers." He was one of the greatest of them all. James Baldwin. Most white Americans Baldwin met had seen a black person, had a black classmate, or maybe a black maid, but they never truly knew one. And Baldwin wasn't afraid to say that out loud. James Baldwin was one of the sharpest, most fearless voices of the 20th century. A black man, a truth-teller, an activist, and yes, openly gay at a time when being all three was dangerous. He didn't just write books. He ripped the mask off America and forced the world to face what it tried so hard to hide: race, class, sexuality, and the cost of being human. Baldwin never apologized for who he was. He spoke honestly about loving men, and his work reflected that courage. But he also rejected labels. Gay, homosexual, queer. He believed all those words boxed people in. To Baldwin, love was love, and the heart didn't follow society's categories. In 1956, he released Giovanni's Room, a novel about a man who falls in love with another man in Paris. For a black American writer in the 1950s, that wasn't just bold, it was revolutionary. Publishers begged him not to do it. Friends warned him he was risking his career. Baldwin said he wrote it anyway because not writing it would have been a lie. And the truth was the only thing he ever promised himself. He continued that honesty in Just Above My Head, where he explored the tender, complicated love between black men. Baldwin never treated sexuality like a scandal. He treated it like life: messy, beautiful, heartbreaking, hopeful. His characters were full people, not stereotypes, long before the rest of the world was ready to see them that way. But while he was open on the page, Baldwin kept his real love life deeply private. He rarely spoke about the men he cared for. Most of what we know comes from biographies written long after he passed. Still, it's clear he had relationships in America, France, and Turkey, quiet loves he protected, because the world wasn't ready to protect him. In a 1984 interview, Baldwin explained something profound. Being black and gay didn't make him an outsider, it gave him vision. It allowed him to see injustice clearly. It gave him a voice sharp enough to cut through hypocrisy. And it helped him understand the loneliness, fear, and longing that so many people carried but couldn't name. James Baldwin died in 1987, but his legacy is immortal. His courage opened the door for countless queer black writers. His words taught the world that identity is complicated, that love refuses to fit into society's little boxes, and that the truth, even when uncomfortable, is the only path to freedom. Baldwin didn't just write about the human soul. He exposed it. Willie Ninja. To the world, he was a dancer. But to the LGBTQ community, especially Black and Latino queer youth, Willie Ninja was a lifeline. A legend. A leader who shaped an entire culture with nothing but his truth and his movement. Most people first discovered him in the groundbreaking 1990 documentary Paris is Burning, the film that pulled the curtain back on New York City's underground ballroom scene. And even in a room full of icons, Willie stood out instantly, sharp, elegant, fierce. His presence was electric. His talent was undeniable. Willie wasn't just openly gay, he was proud, at a time when pride could cost you everything. In the 80s and 90s, being a gay black man, expressing himself through bold, feminine, powerful dance, made him a target. But Willie never dimmed his light. He kept teaching, kept performing, and kept pushing ballroom culture forward. They called him the godfather of voguing, and for good reason. He didn't create voguing, but he perfected it, elevated it, and turned it into an art form. Inspired by the flawless poses in Vogue magazine, voguing became a way to fight, to shine, to survive. And Willie made sure the next generation learned not just the moves, but the meaning behind them. He mentored young dancers, trained performers, and brought an entire community out of the shadows and onto the main stage. And Willie didn't stop at the ballroom door. Fashion houses like Jean-Paul Gaultier and Thierry Mugler invited him into their worlds. He walked runways, coached supermodels, and introduced voguing to global fashion long before Madonna's Vogue made the style mainstream. What the world loved, Willie and his community lived. But one of the most powerful chapters of Willie's life came off the dance floor, when he used his platform to fight for his community during the HIV/AIDS crisis. At a time when fear and silence were killing people, Willie spoke loudly. He educated, encouraged testing, and urged ballroom families to protect each other. He understood the pain his community carried, and he refused to let them face it alone. Tragically, Willie Ninja passed away in 2006 at only 45 years old from heart failure related to AIDS. His death was devastating, but his legacy never dimmed. Willie Ninja wasn't just a dancer. He was a movement, a mentor, and a mirror for those who needed to see themselves. And even today, every pose, every step, every beat in the ballroom echoes with his spirit. Howard Rollins. Howard Rollins wasn't just a good actor, he was extraordinary. In the 1980s and 1990s, his performances in Ragtime and In the Heat of the Night made him one of the most respected black actors of his generation. On screen, he carried a quiet strength, the kind that made audiences lean in and believe every word he spoke. But behind the scenes, Howard lived with a truth he couldn't share, not in the Hollywood of that era. Howard Rollins was a gay man in a time when being openly gay could destroy an actor's entire career. And for a black actor, the pressure was even heavier. Roles were already limited, racism was everywhere, and one wrong step could end everything. So Howard hid his truth, carefully and painfully. Publicly, he kept his private life locked away. Privately, he found comfort in the company of other gay black actors like Raymond St. Jacques and Paul Winfield, safe spaces where he could breathe, laugh, and simply exist. But secrets come with a cost. The constant pressure to hide who he truly was began to crush him. Hollywood demanded perfection, silence, and a mask he could no longer hold up. The weight pushed him toward drugs and alcohol, choices that slowly unraveled his once brilliant career. By the time he was written out of In the Heat of the Night, the damage was hard to undo. Then came the diagnosis, AIDS-related lymphoma, in the mid-1990s. Like so many gay men of his generation, Howard suffered in silence. The stigma was cruel. The judgment was relentless. And once again, he hid the truth to protect what little he had left. Howard Rollins passed away in 1996 at just 46 years old. Only after his death did people begin speaking openly about who he really was. The brilliant actor. The gentle soul. The man who never got the chance to live in a world where he could be fully himself. His story is a reminder of how many legends carried heavy secrets just to survive. Which part of Howard's story surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this touched you, hit like and subscribe for more powerful untold stories.